Olá! Boa tarde a todos! Nós estamos aqui na segunda mesa do terceiro e, infelizmente, último dia de Relampeio. E, como vocês talvez já saibam, talvez não, o Relampeio é um festival literário internacional relâmpago que acontece online, de forma gratuita, com transmissão ao vivo de conversas com autores de vários lugares do mundo aqui no YouTube. Então, por favor, assine aqui o nosso canal, ative o sininho para receber notificações, e isso nos ajuda bastante para os próximos anos. A gente também tem a nossa chave Pix aqui embaixo na descrição. A gente está fazendo, assim, diversos sorteios de livro. Corram nas nossas redes sociais para ganhar livro. Tem muito livro, gente, muito livro bom. E hoje nós temos um painel sobre sexualidade na ficção especulativa. Então, quem vai estar com a gente agora é o Victor Manibo, das Filipinas, o Eric Novello e a Anita Saltiel. Ai, que painel mais lindo! Não é só porque é o que eu estou mediando. A gente também conta com a nossa equipe de tradutores, e hoje estamos com a Vanessa Guedes e a Iana. E no nosso backstage temos a Lídia Colares e a Débora Rapp. Então, eu vou trocar para o inglês agora para a gente se apresentar e para vocês conhecerem os nossos convidados maravilhosos. Hi! Switching to English now. Well, so as I already said in Portuguese, our panel today is about sexuality and speculative fiction, which is a very, very different theme for Relampeio. We've never talked about this, and I think it's going to be a very interesting talk. And before we begin, even with our descriptions, I would like to make a small disclaimer here. Because we're talking about something, right, sex and sexuality, that can be a delicate subject. So sex is not a part of everyone's lives, and that can be for a variety of reasons, but it's not something that is a part of just everyone's lives, and that is perfectly fine. And we are not trying to, with this panel, say that people should be writing about sex. What we want to do is have a conversation between people who do write about it and who want to write about it. And because even though it is a very delicate subject, right, it's still good, it's still better for us to actually have conversations about it among people who try to have a positive attitude towards it. And so if you don't like sex, or if you don't like writing about sex or reading about sex, that is fine. And that's not a problem. This panel does not intend to convince people to write or read about it. We just want to talk about it among us, the people who want to read and write about it. And now that that disclaimer is done, I'm going to describe myself, and then I'm going to ask our guests to also describe themselves and introduce themselves. So I am Calita dos Santos. I'm an author, I'm a narrative designer, and I am a master in creative writing and MA in creative writing. And I am a white person with a side cut and very long hair on the other side of that side cut. I am wearing a little bit of makeup. I have like a cat eye and a brown lipstick. And on my background, you can see a picture of a bridge in the black and white and a bookshelf with some plants on it. And I'm sitting on a big dark chair, like a boss chair. And I'm wearing a dark striped blouse. So, Victor, if you could, Victor is on this side. Victor, please describe yourself and introduce yourself for us.
Sure. Hello, mabuhay, hola, everyone. My name is Victor Manibo. I am a Filipino speculative fiction writer living in New York City in the United States. My pronouns are he and him. For visual descriptors, I am an Asian man with medium length, kind of wavy hair and facial hair. I am wearing dark blue denim shirts, and in my background, you can see rainbow colored books and a neon sign that's kind of purplish. Um, Again, I am a speculative fiction writer. I mostly write novels. I have a debut novel coming out in a couple of days called The Sleepless, and it's a little cyberpunk murder mystery. I am very excited to be here on this panel. I like talking about sex and writing about sex, specifically queer sex, because I am a queer man. I am a gay man. I'm proud of it, and I like infusing that into my art. So very happy to be here.
Okay, thank you, Victor. Anita, why don't we go with you next?
Okay. Hello. This is my cat, and she's a thing. Hi. My name is Anita Saltiel. I am a writer, sex worker, actress, model, and so many other things. I am a white woman with brown eyes and some green hair. And anyway, I have a black t-shirt, and in my background you can see my art here, and my freaking cat was here too. So she's white and cute, and she will participate too as well.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Always good to have feline guests with us.
Yeah, she is my pretty baby.
Cats and literature are a good match.
Yeah.
Yes. Eric, please.
Hi everyone, thank you for being here, relampeando with us. Well, my name is Eric Novello. I'm a Brazilian author. I'm the author of Neon Azul, Exorcismos, Amores e uma Dose de Blues, and Ninguém Nasce Herói. For more than a decade, I worked as a translator of books and comic books. Now I'm a script writer in the game industry. I'm a 43-year-old white man. I'm bisexual, cisgender. My hair and my eyes are dark. My hair is kind of short, I guess. My beard is really white. Or maybe it looks like a zebra, I don't know. Am I wearing a dark coat over a lot of coats? So because it's really cold here. And that's it.
All right. Thank you. I'm really, really glad to mediate this panel because I think that we are exposed to a lot of things sex, right? We are exposed to sex in so many ways, like from marketing campaigns all the time about any kind of product that use sexuality and objectification to sex in media and like sometimes even movies and series that are like targeted at teenagers already have a lot of heavy sexualization, but I feel like queer sexuality and the more positive look on sexuality are kind of left out of, of all that. So I'm very glad we're having this conversation. And I'm going to start our questions by asking if it's frequent for you to write sex scenes and whether you do it only like on hot fiction or in all fiction that you write. I think we're going to like start with Victor, go to Anita and Eric, and after that I'm going to start mixing up the orders so that each one answers first one of the questions. Victor, please.
Sure. I often write sex scenes in all of my works. I think it's because it's fun to write. Personally, I find it fun to write sex scenes in the same way that some people might like writing fight scenes and action scenes. I have that too, but you kind of want to represent the whole kind of human experience. And honestly, when you think about human beings, like in your daily life, you probably encounter sex, you probably have sex more than you fight with people with like guns or knives or like, engage in acts of violence that are commonly depicted. So like, as a science fiction writer, as a horror writer also, like I want to see all of that violence. I want to show all of that tension and like fighting and arguing, but also the tender moments of like sex in the context of relationships, or even like in like casual settings where is no relationship. You have maybe two complete strangers, and the reason for that, at least personally, besides that it's fun, is because, like I said, I kind of want to portray a world where um, all human experiences um, kind of have equal importance, or are depicted in a way that like uh, fleshes out this world. They're all imaginary worlds, right? So like you can't have an imaginary futuristic world or like a fantasy world set in a different setting that doesn't have sex. I think it's unavoidable, and for me, because it's unavoidable, I just lean into it. I just like, let's go for it. Let's have a sex scene. And so yeah, the short answer is yes. And I think as I grow as a writer, the sex scenes grow more and more and more. There's more of them, more kinds of them, longer, more explicit, and it's just more fun that way.
Wow.
Thanks, Victor. Anita.
Well, I am a sex worker and I work as a stripper, but I'm also a porn screenwriter. So I do write sex scenes in other. Gente, desculpa, meu inglês tá.
It's okay. Anita, se quiser perguntar alguma coisa.
Yeah, we can help you if you want to.
Sorry, I'm really nervous.
No need to feel sorry about it.
Just ask us.
It's fine, yeah.
There is no.
And I do write sex scenes in my fantasy novels as well, because I think, as Victor said, I think sex is part of my life and the life of people who are around me, and I want my characters to be the best human beings. I mean, não é melhores, eu quero que eles sejam humanos. Gente.
The most human.
Most human. Yeah. And I think, especially in fantasy, when people think about sex, it's always like, oh, it's a fantasy novel. You can't do that. You can't have sex in the middle of a battle. But why? Why not? If you're stressed, and sex is a way to not being stressed, I don't know if I am saying too much, but I write because of this, especially.
Guys, no worries about saying too much. This panel is aimed at adults, and we can say everything we want. That's fine. Don't worry. Nothing is off limits. Maybe something can be off limits, but I would rather we try to get there instead of like saying that you can't say this or that beforehand. Eric.
Yeah. I don't know if frequent is the right word to use for me, but it's normal for sure to write sex scenes. I think sex it's an important part of my work since the beginning. My work as a writer. Please, I'm still holding this last card for the future. Because since my first book, sex scenes were there, meaning something important. Sometimes it was important for the characters to explore, to understand those characters. Sometimes it was important because of the plot, and sometimes just for myself, because I don't know. The point I guess is that I would never avoid writing a sex scene fearing bad reviews or repercussion. I will never avoid going where I need to go to tell a story. And sometimes sex is the best tool, or is just to reveal something, or just to have fun. It's okay to write sex scenes just to have fun. No,
Yeah.
my first commitment as a writer is to myself, I guess, so to my creative freedom, and as a consequence to the story. And sex is part of the mix I like to use to tell those stories.
All right. We're going to already ask something that I think Olivia has already asked also in our comments. So we're going to join together one of our questions with a question from the public, which is, do you believe that people resist sex scenes like outside of hot fiction? Because you go to hot fiction if you want to read those kinds of things. But do you think people resist it outside of hot fiction? And Olivia asked if you have observed a re-emerging Puritanism among young people in matters related to sexual representation in literature and other medias. So now we start with Anita.
Yes, but in a weird way. I mean, people are always. Como que eu falo confundir, gente?
Mistaking this for that?
Yeah. People are always mistaking Puritanism with a sexuality. And there's no connection, you know? A sexual people are a sexual people, and Puritanism is Puritanism. And especially this year, you know, it's a new thing, I think. And people are saying purity things, saying it's about asexual people, and you know you can't have a sex scene because of asexual people and restricted asexual people. And I think this is kind of, you know, it's sad and makes me angry, because I have lots and lots and lots of asexual friends, and restricted and not sex repulsive, and you know, sex positive, sex repulsive, you know, a kind of lots of people anyway. And I don't see this Puritanism, you know. These people are not worrying about this. It's people are mistaking things, and yeah, it's making me very, very, very angry in lots of ways.
Yeah.
I think one thing that I may totally be wrong about this, but it feels to me like when you decide that asexual people as a whole cannot see any mentions of sex, it makes it harder for asexual people to actually see themselves represented in media.
Yeah.
Because then you don't have the contrast, you know, then all characters don't mention and don't get anywhere near sex, and you don't know which of them don't get anywhere near sex because they don't want to, or because of whatever reason, like that is not explored. And you also can't show any shades of asexualism, because a person can be asexual in so many different ways. Like asexuality is not just one thing, and like, oh, it's just this model of being asexual. So if you just decide that you can't ever show any kind of sex or sexuality in media, you're actually doing asexual people a disservice, I feel like. Then if all characters are asexual, of course, Not literally this, but if no one has sex, then you can't actually look at a media and say, oh, that character is asexual, and that character is carrying my flag, and that character is demisexual, and is carrying my flag, and I can see myself in those relationships. Like you're actually doing the community a disservice.
Yeah, but this is a seek for representation, it's a seek for diversity. It's not puritanism. It's two different things, and people are mistaking this. So
Eric?
Or at least they say they're mistaken. That's
yeah.
a trick point to explore. I was thinking about that because of that nightmare that happened on Twitter. and
Which nightmare? Because I feel like there are so many things happening on Twitter at the same time.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep track of what's going on.
Yeah, it's kind of a living hell there. But people were complaining about sex scene and asking for Netflix to have a way to skip sex scenes. It was and I was, oh my god, I want a way to skip right to the sex scene. Let me skip the whole movie and go to the sex scene. So, but I was thinking about that, and here in Brazil, I don't know, it's not, how can I say, it's not something new for us here, to see readers complaining about sex scenes. It's like it is okay if you have a lot of romance, a lot of violence. I think sometimes people are okay with rape scenes, but not with a sex scene that's more like something more natural, more healthy. Yeah, consensual. And people love humor, boring action scenes that will never end. But sex scenes, oh my god, they need to be necessary, necessary, whatever it means. But I remember reading reviews and text saying this kind of thing since my early years as a writer, So I try not to judge, because I don't think it's so easy to understand the reasons behind this behavior with a focus on the present moment. Are we just reliving a conservative nightmare? No, because we are living a kind of conservative time or a conservative wave. Is it the possibility of easily find sex on internet anytime you want? I don't know. Maybe there is something there that we are nah, I don't know, not getting. So it's the attempt. You're seeing this. It is the attempt of erase or kidnap our subjectivity that we see every single day on social media, and that already affects the way we see our sexuality and our bodies, starting to affect other areas. I don't have an answer, but I have a lot of questions. We had for a long time sex scenes filmed, written by cisgender and heterosexual male directors and writers. And it was kind of awful, but at the same time, we know what they wanted to show. We know why those scenes existed. And I think, to be honest, those scenes were okay for me because it was the 90s, so they were all I could get. So I remember reading books and comic books is expecting to find something sexual, and if I didn't find it, I would probably be disappointed, I guess. I needed then to understand myself. That's the point, or to have some fun. Again, I will say that again. It's cool it's cool reading or watching something just to have fun. But years later, I don't know. We can find anything. You pick your mobile and you have a door to any kind of content. And maybe, I don't know, I'm speculating, just maybe some readers are not finding a healthy way to deal with this possibility, so they just avoid the subject. That's it.
Thank you, Eric. Victor.
Yeah, just jumping off of the last thing that Eric said, I feel that a lot of writers, I include myself, sometimes have to avoid certain like thorny issues because of resistance and a lot of pushback, especially on social media. Um, this is why I also try to step away from it as much as I can. But it's hard because that's also where you find your community. That's also where you find your friends. And that's also how you find a lot of different viewpoints, not just from like where you are geographically. So, social media is always like a minefield. It has pros and cons. And when I hear of talk about sex and the pushback on certain sexual content, I always see like the pushback in general or the resistance in general is about certain kinds of sex. It's not just sex in general. Like Anita and Eric were saying, like we've had decades of representation of a certain kind of sexual act, certain people having sex, and those are fine, those are accepted, those are even expected. You cannot have a James Bond film without James Bond having sex with at
Yes.
least one woman. You
Yeah.
cannot have Game of Thrones without apparently a woman being
Lots of
sexually
rape.
assaulted. Right. Yeah. So like it's almost expected. So like the resistance is about certain types of depictions of sex. And that's what I think, at least for me, that's what I like focus on and interrogate and like why. And a part of it comes down to audience, right? I am from the Philippines. We're a very conservative, we're very Catholic, but also um, because of current events, we're also very socially conservative again, which is kind of the same as what's going on in the U.S. And I have to think about who am I writing my books for, and are the people that I want reading my books, are they going to have as rich of a reading experience if I withhold sex as a part of my characters' lives, and they're not. Um, you know, I write cyberpunk sci-fi. I write mysteries, which are detective stories, and we think about those kind of genres. They're very male-driven. They're very straight-driven. Um, and I'm like, well, you know what? Then I'm gonna write those kinds of stories that aren't so straight male white driven. And so you'll have a character like me who's gay, or characters who are non-binary and trans, and we'll show what kind of relationships they have, including the sex that they have. And there is an audience for that. Those are the people that I write for. Those people are not resistant to that kind of sex. And um, I think that audience, that readership is bigger than everybody believes. So I think in the same way that there are audiences that resist certain types of sex, so I, as an artist, also should resist like them saying like, oh, it's like a battle, and I'm hopeful that the side of greater diversity is always going to win.
Yeah.
Surely hope so. All right. Now, Eric mentioned something about like how sometimes people demand that the sex scenes or sex in general in the story, like they have to be meaningful and they have to bring a specific thing to the story. What can it add to a story? What I don't think it has to, but I'm sure it can. So let's start with Eric now. Eric, what do you think sex can add to a narrative?
Okay. It's totally a personal approach of sex scenes, because what I would say right now, because I see myself as a demisexual person, and that's a fact. It's an important part of who I am. So for me, sex will you'll never be only about the climax, or even about the sex act for itself. It's kind of, oh, let's go to bed, let's come, and that's it. Please don't call me tomorrow. It's- it doesn't work for me. So sex for me, it's about all the process that leads to this moment. And I'm not talking about love, romance, or this kind of stuff. So yeah, I need a high level for play, but it's more than this. I also need everything that comes before that. The flirtation, the discovery of the other, the experience of being seen in a different light, talking to someone that knows how to to find the right sentences, to click the right buttons. This game of seduction, the self-discovery, that the idea of having sex with someone can bring to our lives. So when I write sex scenes in my stories, what I'm doing is put the characters in a journey that that I can enjoy, but also I can use to discover something about those characters. So I think it's a kind of investigation, a kind of exploration. So, for example, when I think about one of my books, Exorcismos, Amores e uma Dose de Blues, my urban fantasy, the book wouldn't exist without the sex scene. It wouldn't exist, or at least it would be a completely different book. Thiago Boanerges, the main character, had a unhealthy relationship with a muse, one of the muses that inspired us, this kind of muse. So in the first sex scene, I explored the consequence of this relationship. He feels empty, looking for a substitute for that love, and trying to understand what happened to him. In the second one, Thiago starts to make peace with his own past, to understand kind of what happened to him, and he finds a clue of that is inserted in the main mystery of the story. And at the end, in the third sex scene, he really realized his muse wasn't in love with him. So it was a process for him, and I needed 3 sex scenes to construct this. So I think you can use sex scenes to create, a whole different. I don't know, any kind of story, any kind of journey, any kind of character development you want.
All right. Victor.
Yeah, I like Eric's answer. I also try to do character work in my sex scenes. I think there's a lot that you can reveal about a character in their like sexual relationships, right? But I also try to do a little bit of world building when I have my sex scenes and portray what this world, which usually they're futuristic worlds for sci-fi, um, what are the values around sex in this world, right? In my current or my upcoming book, for example, um, the main character has random sex and he goes on an app. So it's not that different to our current world. It's still how, a lot of people, at least I imagine it's still going to be how a lot of people find sexual partners, like if they want one right away, right? They go to an app. And then showing the dynamics of that and the level of technology, because this is a story that happens 25 years into the future. So there are different tools, there are different technologies that might facilitate and also complicate how somebody finds a sexual partner. So it's not just also to go back to what Eric was saying, like it's not just showing the sex scene itself, but the lead up to it. You can show the world. You can flesh out the world by showing the lead up to the sex scene. I have another book coming out next year, hopefully, where there is an orgy, and I enjoyed writing this. It was like 3 chapters, just orgy, but it's, obviously I'm trying to do some character work, but at the same time, I'm trying to reveal what this world is like. And, that story is going to be kind of like my idea of the fall of the United States as an empire, as an analogy to the Roman Empire, and how the aristocrats of that time had all these excesses, including, sexual orgies. So I'm trying to draw that parallel, and I'm trying to show how, sex and attitudes about sex say something about that world that I'm creating. So that's always something that I think about. If I can manage to, build character and also build the world in my sex scenes, that would be like ideal for me.
That's really cool. We have some people in the comments already saying that they hadn't thought about sex scenes in like this. Like, oh, it's not just about character; it can also like show the world around it. Anita.
Yeah, like Victor, I really enjoy writing sex scenes. There are, for example, also horror scenes. I mean, portray a fear that of the character and insecurity, give a sense of urgency, an addiction to being sensual. These sex scenes can be, I mean, build a whole mechanics of the characters. Sex scenes can be about everything but sex. And I think that's my favorite thing about writing those kind of scenes. The scenes that doesn't have to have a meaning, but I like to do it. I like to write about something that shows something of the character that you wouldn't find in other situations easily. And it can be, like Victor said, word building. It can be like a character's mind, and I think it's a fun way to write those scenes.
Sex is a revealing moment.
Yeah, that's it.
All right. And still in this thing. Oh, we have a kitty.
Yeah, this is Shizui. She is my baby, and she's
Oh my
really,
god.
really, really, really annoying.
No.
She's adorable.
Yeah.
Very cute. She looks like a giant marshmallow.
Yeah, she is a gem.
She just wants to talk about sex as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She wants to join. She wants to join the conversation. It's so much fun.
So we talked a bit about what a sex scene can add to a story, and our next question is kind of intertwined with that. So if you feel like you don't want to like spend too long on it, that's fine. But how do you feel a sex scene can move a plot forward? And does it always have to? So I'm gonna go with Victor now.
I think this is something that I guess we as creators have heard a lot. Like, oh, why is there a sex scene there? Is it plot relevant? And I'm like, it doesn't matter. To me, it doesn't matter. Sometimes it's just fun. Sometimes it's just there. Um, Always, because you are working in a medium that has limitations, right? In our case, in my case, like words, you want your words to be able to do more than one thing. You want it to be able to reveal character. You want it to be able to reveal the world. You might want it to be able to reveal something about the plot, where when we think of plot, we mean cause and effect. The sex causes something, or something happens and then therefore they have sex. That's not really how sex works in general, at least in my experience. It's not like there is an event, therefore I am having sex with this person, or vice versa, right? It has been done really well. We were talking about, or I had mentioned James Bond earlier, like sometimes people have sex to use or manipulate someone, That is very common in some mystery stories and some thrillers. That's plot relevant sex. That's not really something that I like to do because it feels, as a reader, as it feels like manipulative. Like you're manipulating a character, but you're manipulating me. You're just moving things along. It's not enjoyable to me, especially because those scenes sometimes when they're written, um, the other character who is not the lead character, who is usually a woman, is just a tool, is just an instrument to move things along. So I try to stay away from like plot relevant sex. Um, so my short answer is no. It doesn't have to be relevant. You kind of want it to reveal more about your story. It doesn't have to reveal events. It doesn't have to reveal cause and effect. It can reveal character. It can reveal world. It can reveal that person's mental state at the time. I've had characters having sex because, um, as Anita was saying earlier, like they just want stress relief. Like that is completely normal, and honestly, maybe 50% of the reason why some people have sex. They just want to have some sort of release, and that's not plot relevant, but that's something that people need, and you want to show that too.
Yeah. Let's go with Anita now.
Yeah, as I said before, a sex scene can show a lot of things about the characters. May show like a fetish that is important to your formation as a person. Can show the body type that the character is interested in. It can show a fear and insecurity, a deep desire that has nothing to do with sex. And the circumstances of the scene taking place as well as the consequences of it. So a sex scene can be just a scene, but I believe that even sex scenes writing just for fun also end up showing something about the characters and the story being told. And it's really cool when the scene has a propose, but it doesn't need to. And whoever writes that kind of scene, doesn't need to feel the need to teach the reader something or move the story exclusively. I think it, yeah, that's what I think. It can be just a sex scene. You can, it's okay and it's fun and it's fun to read. It's fun to write. It doesn't have a single thing bad about it. It's good in all the ways.
Yeah, it's great when it's good, right?
Well,
Eric, what about you?
Yeah, I think plot's not everything in a story. No,
Yeah.
so a story doesn't need to be driven by plot. They can be character driven. They can be more experimental. And it will be okay to have sex scenes in those different contexts. And queer sex scenes are not so common. So
Yeah.
when you write one of these scenes, we are being, I don't know if it's a statement. A statement, maybe it's a strong word here, but we are helping to normalize. Normalize, it's a word that makes sense in English for this context. I don't know, to normalize queer sex, for example. So it's justify the existence for those scenes. I don't need a plot to write, And I was thinking about Crash, a book by Ballard, one of my favorite books. I always talk about it. Ballard uses sex as a metaphor to explore, among other things, the relationship people have with cars, this obsession with big cars, So the characters get aroused when they watch car accidents, when they fuck inside cars, when they
And
are
this is a real fetish. This is, yeah, people have this fetish. Yeah.
Yeah,
in real life.
part of the characters like to be part of car accidents. So it was something very weird, but at the same time very intense for me when I was reading this novel. And it was a long time ago, and I still remember all these feelings, all the emotions, the experience of, oh my God, what I'm reading here. So who cares if it's a question of plot or not, So once more, say I like to see my stories as investigations. So when I'm writing, I'm investigating something about the world around me, things that I don't understand, things that get me scared. So I like to dig into the shadows of my characters without any flashlights. I just go there, discovering what secrets lay, I don't know, below the dirty. And when I do that, I'm trying to discover something about myself as well. So that's it.
All right. I think it's interesting that we entered like a fetish zone with the car fetish. Like that, I was not expecting that.
That's really common. It is.
So our next question, I think it relates to things that you have already said here, but I'd like to hear a bit more on the specific topic, which is, do you think your relationship with sex and fiction has been affected, or like the way was built, was it affected by your queerness?
Totally.
Let's start with Eric then.
No, 100% in fiction and outside fiction, in sex, and I don't know, it goes beyond sex. My queerness affected my relationship with the world, So for me, queer people, we are forced to understand ourselves through the lens of our sexuality, to survive a hostile environment. One day you have a friend, and the other day this friend is hating you because of your sexuality. So because this is what makes us different, our otherness is connected to our sexuality and sometimes to sex. So it's a painful and lonely journey for part of our lives, but at the same time we find joy, understand our real power, and recovering those parts we probably left behind to please people that hated us or just didn't comprehend us. And those experiences, those things we feel in our own skin, they will always affect my literature. So and what I write is very personal, even if I'm choosing to include mages and werewolves and something like that. I don't know. I don't even know if I would write fantasy fiction if I wasn't queer, because for me, fantasy was the space that embraced me when reality, when the real world was saying you're not welcome here. So for me, it's impossible to keep my queerness and sex fiction and my literature apart from each other.
What about you, Anita?
I mean, yeah, for sure. As Eric said, my queerness affected my relationship with the world. I don't date straight people anymore, straight cis people anymore. So, and I don't have just straight cis people around me. I create my own little world of queer people, and that includes my taste in books and media, in not just books about media about sex and with sex scenes, but for me, it's really hard to read a book, for example, that's about cis straight men and women in relationships these days. So I seem to be in the wrong place. That's just not for me anymore, even in fantasy. And that, of course, includes my writing. Like, I write what I see with a touch of fantasy. So how could I ignore all the queer people around me? You know, I am a bisexual woman, and I often write about bisexual women and, you know, non-binary people and trans people and asexual people. Anyway, I I think the straight cis world, it's not for me anymore. Yeah, like I'm seeing the chat, live chat, and Haley said, I have. Ela falou que tem preguiça.
It gets her like lazy.
Yeah, it gets me lazy. Straight cis people gets me lazy.
Victor, what about you?
Yeah, I think Anita and Eric said it really well. I am the same way. It's not something that I can, detach from my writing. My queerness is an integral part of who I am, in the same way that, my racial identity, my religious upbringing, my relationship with my body affects my relationship to sex, and then affects my attitude towards sex in fiction. If I don't think it's possible, even if I try to make an effort, I think my queerness will just bleed through. It's never happened yet. Maybe at one point I'll write a sex scene with straight cis people. I don't know why I would do that, but I think it would still come across as queer. Maybe I'll do it as an experiment and then ask people like, "Hey, what do you think of this? Is there any like queerness in this?" And I'm sure it'll still be there. It's not something that I can turn off. I understand some people have had to do that, especially throughout the history of literature or art. Some people still do that now because they might not feel safe because they're not out. And I know how difficult that is. At some point I was not out, and I didn't feel as free to explore my sexuality by reading queer books, and now by writing queer stories. But now that I am at that fortunate position, it's just like there. It's part of the DNA.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and I don't know if this has happened to you, and then you can tell me if so. But I feel like writing is also a nice place for us to explore things that we can't explore yet in real life. So I remember writing a lot of very, very queer sex scenes when I was a teenager. And I hadn't had that experience that much yet. And it was a place in which I felt like I could, I don't know, toy around with those ideas. And I think there's like, I play RPGs a lot. And lately, there's been this huge movement of queer people playing RPGs. And and I've heard so many people talking about how they were able to first explore being trans, through creating a character that they could act out. And I think it serves well with literature too. Like, you can write about different people, you can try to experiment different things that you haven't lived through that writing. And it can help you understand yourself, just like Eric was talking about. Like, sex can make you understand yourself. Yeah, and writing about it can make you understand yourself too, because you can explore things, right? It's fiction and it's yours to create. So it's a nice way of trying to understand. I've seen Clara saying like, "Oh, who hasn't written some very heavily gay sex scenes in their TV?" Yeah, like it's something that we do, and it can help us understand ourselves better. If you want to comment that, you can.
Well, I play RPG since I was like 12. And I remember one day when I was writing it, writing RPG, in forums and stuff. And I remember to have a crush on a girl, my age. And I wanted to kiss her character. And I was like, but I am straight. But I really want to kiss her. But it's just in the game. If we have a problem with that, but I am straight, but I want to kiss her.
And then,
Maybe I'm not that straight.
Maybe.
Maybe I'm not that straight. So yeah, that's a really that's part of my life, playing RPGs and yeah.
Yeah, and I have one last question before we start getting the other questions from the chat. And this one was actually a very late addition. Like I thought of it just today, and I think it kind of also relates to something that we have a question coming in soon about, which is that some speculative genres, they have sex as basically tropes in them. Like we mentioned Game of Thrones earlier, and although Game of Thrones is not exactly like a grim, dark fantasy, it did use a lot of sexual violence, and dark fantasy uses a lot of sexual violence. Just like cyberpunk often explores prostitution and sex work, not always in I don't know, interesting way. Let's put it like this. Uh, do you feel like these are integral to these genres? And if so, do you think we do have ways to explore these themes in a way that is not harmful? Maybe let's start with Anita this one.
I think so. Speaking as a sex worker, I am not all happy to see some kind of representation that we have, especially in cyberpunk and not all, especially in sci-fi. Like, oh my God, this world is all corrupted and have lots of prostitution, and I'm kind of, oh yeah, all corrupted. Thank you, pass. It's more like a wish that I want to see sex workers characters at, we're normal people. I am pretty normal, and I want to be in sci-fi, not represented as a corrupted character. This is more like a wish than everything. Please, I beg you.
It's just as Victor was saying, like about the femme fatales in James Bond movies. Right?
Yeah, in detective fiction, or it's so kind of like, I don't know, unfortunate that I kind of grew up liking sci-fi and also detective stories, two very misogynistic genres. For it's getting better. It's gotten a lot better. There's still work to do, but you know, when I was writing my stories without thinking of publishing them, I was just like, these are the stories that I want to write. They're not going to be, following the formulas because I don't like that part of the genre, right? I don't like those tropes. But now that I am actually writing and the work is going out there, now I feel like there is at least a little bit of a responsibility as a writer who has a little bit of a platform to say, okay, futuristic science fiction stories can look like this. Moral decay or dystopia doesn't have to involve like rampant sexual violence against prostitutes, which you always see. Detective stories, you don't always have to kill a woman to advance the plot. The you know the last two books that I wrote both have sex workers who are thriving and loving their life, who do not experience violence. They inflict violence, which is a kind of a reversal that I'm trying to do. But it's a project that a lot of newer writers are trying to do that I'm very happy to do. Not to say that writers have this obligation. Like, I think you should write a story that speaks to you, but
Yeah.
to me, it's this like, because the genres that I like to write in have these like kind of problems, that I kind of want to add that into the things that I consider when I do something.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think we've stopped using the trope of a dead girl is found in the middle of a forest. You stop to see, I don't know, 9% of the detective stories we have on Netflix, for example.
And often dead and naked.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. I think we maybe it's interesting to separate two debates. One is that it is okay to explore the problems we have in the queer community. Queer community is not perfect, and we can talk about that. We have different kinds of violence inside the queer community, including abusive relationships. So if you're talking from queer to queer, it's interesting to to explore the subjects and maybe say something about them. But of course, it's different when we are talking about queer people, or I don't know, queer people as something you can just to kill to move your plot, and it's just there. You're not thinking about the reasons behind it. So when you talk about sexual violence, and in Game of Thrones, for example, they are not using this to discuss anything. No, it's there to it's there. But when I think about cyberpunk, for example, we think, if you establish that your body and mechanical parts are kind of the same, we are evaluating the value, sorry, of the human body. You're are used to human beings. We are just objects. We are just things that capitalism can discard when we are not useful anymore. Maybe there is something there that would be that those themes we are talking about would fit in this debate, without being a problem. So I think art can go anywhere, but artists need to understand that we are responsible for what we are doing. So I think that's the point. And if you think about the reasons behind these images we are creating, the chance of creating something more respectful, even if it is impactful, is better, is higher. I don't know how to end this sentence, but you get it. It's bigger, maybe.
And I think Brendan Sanderson on Friday, in his conversation with Felipe and Giuliani, he talked about how he had written some sexual violence that he now regrets, because now he understands that he was just reproducing something he felt that was always like that it was a staple in the genre, and that he now understands that that's not not nice, and it's not something that he likes when he's reading something. So I think that this that Eric brought also kind of relates to this, because sometimes people just reproduce something. They don't think about like, oh, why am I writing this here? Why am I killing a girl and leaving her naked in the forest? Right? Why is this the way that I chose to tell my story? And then they don't stop to maybe try and understand what has influenced them to do that and what has influenced the people who are influencing them to do that, because it's not something that started yesterday, right? We read uh, our contemporaries, and we also read people who have died, of course, but we read people, we read recent books, and we kind of reproduce whatever we're reading, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes.
I believe tropes exist for a reason, because they work. But I like to read new authors and independent authors who take these tropes, and we are so tired of them, and they change everything, and they bring a representation that really touches you because it's different from what the media throws you all the time. And that's why I feel out of place when I see sex worker tropes, for example, because I'm always afraid of to encounter more of the same thing. But it turns out that most of the same worked someday, which is why it gets replicated. I believe there is a difference between your seek for representation and you wanting to, you know, cut the balls of the writer. It's not that. It's not about this.
Depending on the writer, you can.
Yeah, they can like, and that's okay, but it's not about cut them balls. You just want something new. That's why.
Guys, I'm going to start asking you some questions that the people in the chat have asked. We have such a nice chat today. Hi, chat. You guys have been amazing. People are like commenting nonstop. Our first question is from Gabriel Yared, and he asks if you believe that erotic literature has a responsibility in any way to teach about prevention practices against STIs and things like this.
Ooh.
Responsibility is such a big word.
Yeah.
I don't think, number one, I don't think I'm qualified necessarily. I know safe sex practices, to some extent, to some degree, I practice some of them. I don't think that my writing is the place to teach or influence people about it. I think that some people might want to do that. It's just not interesting to me because I don't think I have the expertise to do that. And I also have not found, necessarily the right story in which it might be like interesting for those things to come up. Which is not to say that others can't do it or won't be able to do it well. It's just not something that I've explored yet, and I'm honestly like going back to what we were saying earlier, a little worried about the responsibility, because it is a responsibility. If you take on that responsibility, you want to be able to do it well. I don't think that given what I know, so I would be able to do it myself. Somebody else might.
Eric, Anita?
Yeah, I was talking about this the other day because Twitter had a fight about
When doesn't it?
whether or not use condoms in sex scenes. And my point is not about teaching condom use, but why not? If you can write something that is safe and still make it sexy, why not do it? and it doesn't spoil a story. It doesn't make this bad. It's just a, you know, the sex scene is amazing, you know, and then why not? People treat condoms like it's not sexy, you know, and this makes me angry, and it's not a responsibility, you know. It's just something you can do, and the sex scene will be amazing, and you know, why not?
What about
Yeah.
you, Eric?
Yeah, I think it's not about obligations, but we as writers we choose our personal missions. But I can I Anita was talking about using condoms on literature, including them on the sex scenes, and I lived through the 90s. I saw people dying of AIDS around me. People were there and they weren't anymore. So I include condoms in my sex scenes, but it's a personal choice. You know, I don't think everybody needs to put condoms or everybody needs to do this
Yeah,
stuff or that stuff. So when we think about 50 Shades of Grey and BDSM, where is responsibility there? There is no responsibility there, you know. But at the same time, I don't know. So many people enjoyed the book, and it was an obligation for the author to I don't know, to use the right dynamics and do a research and put everything in fiction as things work in reality. You know, I the borders between reality and fiction right now are kind of blurred. We are living in these strange times, but I would resist to say anything it's an obligation in art. You know.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that when Anita was speaking, I remembered was that what Victor was talking about earlier, that about how a sex scene can like reveal about the setting and the character. And maybe when you intentionally leave out condoms, for example, that can say something about that place. Maybe that place doesn't grant the people who live in it easy access to condoms and other uh, things that you can use, like medicine and stuff, you know, things to help you with that. And STI prevention, or maybe that character is being self-destructive and doesn't want to use condoms in that moment because they're, I don't know, going to have sex with a stranger for the third time today. And you want to show that they're doing something in this sense. So, but I think maybe there is a difference between teaching and understanding that this is a part of, you know, the life of someone who has sex. So for when I think of teaching, I think of the book kind of sitting there and giving the reader a banana.
yeah,
And saying, wow, so this is how you do it, which is different from, as Anita said, just adding a line like, oh, then got the condom
no, you know,
and put it on, and then, and you know, it's just one sentence. It's, but that is different from teaching, right?
yeah,
Teaching has a way to it, and you can have someone who is a sex education professional and he's a writer, but not all writers will be sex educators. So
yeah.
it's
This discussion was really weird because people were treating condoms like if it was something anti-sexy, and this just made me think that creativity is lacking. You know, it's It's not teaching. It's just a sentence, as you said.
Guys, our next question comes from Luca. Hi, Luca. And he asks, setting Puritanism aside, do you think there is something that should be avoided in sex scenes? Or maybe certain readers should avoid reading certain things?
I don't think so. It's always cool to avoid, violence and I need to elaborate this. Eric, help me, please.
Victor is going to say something.
Oh
Yeah,
my
yeah,
God,
yeah.
I was waiting for you all because it's so difficult.
Yeah, sorry.
It's always difficult when you talk about like should or shouldn't when it comes to writing. I think everybody has, and it's a good thing that everybody has their own values that they bring into their art, right? For me personally, I don't think that you always have to act with care with what you're writing. That's first and foremost. Should there be things that you should avoid? I I, I, I would say no. I mean I would say like as long as you're doing things with care, with consideration of why you're doing it and how it might affect a certain people or a certain segment of people. Like when we think of things that you want to avoid in writing in general, not just sex scenes, you think of like um, you know, oh, you shouldn't depict the worst possible things. But sometimes the worst possible things are part of the human experience and need to be discussed and need to be examined. And if you're coming at it from that angle, if you're representing it in, as fair a way as possible, as well researched as you can, um, and with consideration for the reader and like with a real understanding of your own intentions on why you're doing this, then it could be good. It could actually benefit yourself and the reader. We can talk about depictions of rape. We can talk about depictions of genocide. Like these are things that happen in real life when they're used badly, when they're used poorly, when a writer is using them as tropes, then obviously you shouldn't do that. Obviously, there's no care that goes into that. But otherwise, I'm always more leaning on the side of do whatever you want as long as you're exercising care.
Yeah, I think Victor was perfect in his answer. I just want to add something that should not is a dangerous list to start. If you start to creating this should not list, and who will control this list at some point?
Yeah.
So
I was thinking about what I wanted to say, and it's always nice to avoid scenes of violence when that scene isn't meant to be violent. For example, you have to be careful. There are things that, for example, you write thinking that everyone will understand consent, but sometimes they don't. And then that character becomes an abuser unintentionally. And when you didn't plan it, it's, unfortunately, when the book wins the award, there's no turning back. So I don't think
Shades of Grey.
yes, like Shades of Grey. So I don't think there's things to avoid, but there are things to pay attention to. So that's what's my point about violence. You can't take it back when you're not.
And now our last question, which is by Rebecca. And I think this is a very relevant one. That's why I'm like sneaking it in right here at the end. She asks what you think of hypersexualization of certain sexualities and experiences and bodies. So I'm extending a bit. So she says that, for example, it seems to be more acceptable for queer sex to appear in media if it's sex between women, and that polyamory is always seen through the lens of sex and orgies. So, what do you guys think about this? Like, if you have anything to comment on this.
Are there gonna be easy questions? Oh my god! Like,
I think it sucks, right? You know, I mean, they're not often right by people who, you know, who are polyamorous, for example. You know, there are straight cis people writing about something they don't know and they don't research about. So I think research is the key here. You know, you can write about everything. Like, I'm not saying that a straight cis person cannot write about a poly couple, but I think everybody needs to research and listen to people who represents what that kind of character they are writing, you know.
and also to add, I think writers should think about, why am I writing this kind of story? If you are, a straight person, why are you writing about a trans character? If you have no experience about polyamory, why are you depicting a, polyamorous relationship, for example? What are your intentions? And from there, you might discover that maybe this is not my story to tell. Maybe I can do the best research that I can, and it still wouldn't be good because the grounding is not correct, because the reasoning for why I want to tell the story is not the firmest of reasoning. Maybe you just think, oh, I just think it's cool. And for a lot of, artistic choices, that's fine. Sometimes I just write things because they're cool. But there
Yeah.
are some topics that are just, this is like, I'm crossing a boundary here of like, I do not have the expertise for this. I'm not the right vehicle for this. I can do my best, but sometimes even my best might not be good enough. And you want to make your art as good as possible, right?
Yeah, I think we need more queer people writing about queer people, all the letters of LGBTQ people writing about their own stories, and people that are not part of the queer community listen more to the guys they are representing, so it's we can learn a lot when we do this simple research, or we just stop and listen to the other. We stop seeing the words just as reflex of our own experiences, and we go beyond to understand who is different, what's happening around us. And I think that we can use the same logic to talk about no monogamic relationships and polyamorous relationships. But that said, that said, I'm bisexual, and it's very common that I write bisexual characters in menage sex scenes. I know that people hate this. People hate this, but I try not
I
to.
don't hate it.
I don't hate it
I
either.
don't hate it.
But I try not to condemn the kink part, the fantasy part of sex, just because there is, bad representation of something. So I think it's important to not jump to the pure things that we were talking about at the beginning of our panel, to solve a problem. Solve a problem creates another problem, no?
I would like to add, and I think this panel has been very communism-free up to now, so I have to ruin that. I think that some of these are, these more acceptable ways of having sex scenes and representation for queer people and polyam people. They can be used by medias with a very liberal message to try and say that they are allies. And then we have things like, I don't know, like Sensate, with a ton of liberal messages. But, oh, look, they have all these pretty people who are so diverse and they have an orgy. So we are allies. And then the messages that are there, they kind of slip, under our noses because, oh, but look, it's so cool. They have pretty diverse people have sex. And the same goes for, I think sex between, like sapphic sex is a big one on that. I remember that a lot of people accused the series Hannibal of being queer baiting. And I'm sorry, there's a church nearby, so you're hearing the bells.
It adds a drama element to our chat.
Yeah, you're talking about Hannibal. It's a God's
It's appropriate.
thing.
Yeah. It's perfect.
And I remember that they had some sex scenes between two women in the third season, and I hated those scenes because they were like Hannibal had other sex scenes, straight sex scenes before, and they were usually very powerful and very like interesting and nice, and you could feel the sexual tension there. But when it got to the sex between two women, it was like a lot of flowers and petals falling, and there was kind of a kaleidoscope thing going on, and it was so clean, and they would moan very softly, and there were no hands, like they were not putting their hands on each other's intimate parts. It was just so clean, and I was like, that's not how that is. That's why is the sex, like the straight sex, so powerful and sometimes even brutal, but then when you have two women, it's so soft and everything is so girly. So and I feel like that's a great way for a show that's, accused of queer baiting to say, we're not queer baiting. Here is some actual queer sex and queer characters. And that's how they portray them. So I feel like that's a huge trap, when media that is not actually made by queer people and that does not actually have queer people as their target audience. But then queer people start liking it, and you do something just to say that, yeah, sure, the queers, we like those. So I feel like we always have to be kind of, I don't know, keep an open eye.
But I think Hannibal, it's not queer baiting at all, but it has queer baiting. That scene was lame, but I think Hannibal is more like a homoerotic subtext. It's pretty erotic, and I like that. But that scene was just, why you're doing this? We don't need this. We can't have the homoerotic subtext. We're enjoying that. I was.
I enjoyed it a lot. I just had a problem with this scene, and it felt to
the
me
scene
like it was a
was-
way for Brian Fuller to say, "No, guys, here's actual
yeah.
queerness," but
And,
he was
and
not.
after that, they had a pig baby. So it was kind
Yeah,
Yeah.
but Victor, you were going to say something.
Oh no, I just like, I was going to say I enjoy the homoerotic tension. I did not need any pandering to me, which I feel like this scene was for. It's like pandering to the queers. Like here is crumbs. Like I'm happy with Will and Hannibal. I can take that. I can just like live in that forever. I loved it. So like yeah, so I was just going to agree with everything that you have all said.
Yeah, I think we are actually already extrapolating a bit of our time. Sorry, translators. So I want to ask you guys if you have anything that you'd like to say. I know that Victor's book is coming out in like 2 days, so please tell us where to find it. The chat really wants to know where to find your book. So yeah, guys, if you have anything to add and tell us your social media, like where can we find you, your books, your works, and if you have any upcoming stuff coming out.
Sure. Thanks again for having me. This was a lot of fun. I feel like we can talk a lot more, but we just ran out of time. I'm really having fun. Thank you, thank you, thank you for having me. Um, I am coming out with a book in 2 days. The Sleepless is coming out. It's available in hardcover and ebook and audiobook. You can get it online. For international folks, I usually direct them to Book Depository, but that's a little iffy depending on where you are. So yeah, please check it out. It's a sci-fi noir murder mystery set in a world where some of the people don't sleep. It's got a lot of queer characters. The main character is bisexual. There's queer sex in the book. There's queer relationships. There are, just this is me trying to break the sci-fi cyberpunk curse. So hopefully people respond well to it. Again, it's called The Sleepless. And other than that, as a final note, I hope more and more people just uh, encourage the reading and writing of queer sex, explicit queer sex, messy, dirty queer sex, not sanitized queer sex, all sorts of like, we want diversity of sex and relationships. So I hope more and more people read those and obviously write those. So thanks again.
Thank you, Eric.
Well, Victor, Anita, it was a pleasure having this conversation with you folks. And thank you for watching us. I don't know who it is, but if you read Portuguese, I will not talk about my books again, but if you read Portuguese, you can subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. It's called Encruza Criativa. I'm on Twitter and Instagram much more than I would. And
Yeah.
if you never heard about me, my website, ericnovello.com, is a good place to start. I think that's it. Thank you for having me at Relampeio. It was a real pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Victor. Thank you, Kali, Eric. I am on Twitter and Instagram with Anita Saltiel. You can find me there. And I'm also teaching about writing sex scenes. And I have a workshop, so it's next week. So maybe if you're writing and want to know more about erotic literature, I'm here to help. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you so much. And this is Arena, by the way.
Oh,
Hello.
you have like the contrast, light and darkness.
Yeah, I have my black and white babies.
cute. Guys, this has been so nice. People in the chat are very glad with our conversation. Thank you, people in the chat. Having you here talking to us has been great. Thank you, Victor, so much for coming to talk to us. Thank you, Eric and Anita. This was really nice. And to all of you who are watching, our next conversation begins in like 25 minutes, and it's with Charlie Jane Anders. Yeah, about building better futures through science fiction. And Hayley, who is here with us in the chat, will be there too. And also Kinaya, and it will be mediated by Priscilla Satman. So I think it's going to be a really nice conversation. It will be the last one of this year. And thank you so much, the three of you. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, bye-bye. Oh, sorry. No bye-byes. Actually, hello to our translators. And to Deborah, who has been backstage. I am so sorry. Vanessa and Deborah have been here with us the whole time. Deborah translated all of the questions so that I didn't have to go after them. And Vanessa and JP did an amazing job at translating us as we spoke. Thank you so much. Now we can bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks again.
Bye.